So I think we'll go ahead and let Erika introduce herself and take us away.
So, hi, I'll introduce myself in just a second when we get on to the mural board, because there's some pictures of my dog that you need to see. I am going to be using Mural as my presentation medium. And so what I'd like to do is start people off on the board. This is going to be the not very exciting part of the recording. So let's go ahead and get everybody on there. I put a link to one person, not to everyone. So when you log on to that, you should have an option to log on as a visitor. And I'm going to share my screen. And I don't want you to get confused. You are going to be in two places at once. You're going to be in WebEx, looking at my screen being shared, and that's where you're going to spend the first 20 minutes or so, and then we will move you over to the mural board. But I want to get everybody on here first. We have 29 people on already. Okay, so is anybody having trouble? Because we want to get you on here. Okay, 31. That seems pretty good. So I'm going to summon you all here. Yes. So I can see everybody moving around. The other thing I'm going to do is hide cursors for now. And then I'm going to ask you to come back to WebEx. But keep this browser tab open for Mural because we're going to head back to it. All right. Anybody want to cry for help before we move on? Okay. So this is me with various levels of pandemic hair. It has grown a lot over the past year. And this is Poppy, my dog. And so I have a decade of experience working with the Agile, which is what I call it, to keep people from using that word in vain. I've worked in a lot of different contexts and in a lot of different roles. But what's important for today is that I'm a crazy dog lady, and Poppy has taught me a lot about coaching. In fact, she's taken the whole journey with me. She's 11, and she has asked me, oh, man, people are moving things already. Okay, let me lock that down. That's my plan, is to share what Poppy's taught me and a couple other things. I want to acknowledge first that every time I give a talk on conflict, people show up really wanting help because they are experiencing conflict maybe on a daily basis in their teams. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this talk is probably not going to fix that in the course of the next 45 minutes or so that we do this. What I'm hoping to do is give you a few terms that you can search on, some ideas about how to continue on your journey of learning about conflict. And then the bulk of this talk is about giving you a very specific tool, which Catherine and Sherry have mentioned, that you can take to your teams that is not about fixing conflict. It's about creating greater self-awareness on your teams so that they can perhaps help you get them to a better place. So let's put a little bit of a frame on conflict here. There are some good things about conflict. Top of the list is that it may, in fact, be a team moving from storming to norming. It may signal that people are becoming more invested. It may be a fuel for driving beneficial change. And it may be a way that team members are trying to come to a set of behavioral norms that can help them perform better. The hard things about this are that most people are bad at conflict. And people are sometimes messy and don't know it. And coaches, scrum masters, product owners, leaders, we're messy too. And so we can be contributing to the problem without realizing it. So I encourage you to, as a couple people said before we started, focus on improving your emotional intelligence and figuring out how you are interacting with your teams in a way that may be increasing or decreasing conflict. And so this is where the dog comes in. So if you're a dog lover, you may be familiar with some of these. These are what are called calming signals. And this is some of the first stuff that Poppy taught me about coaching. I took this tiny little Pomeranian. She's my first dog. I took her to the dog park because that's where you take dogs. And I took her to the Longmont Dog Park early in the morning when all the farm dogs come out, because that sounded like a good idea. And I basically dropped her in the middle of a swarming pack of dogs. Those of you who are dog owners may realize that I may have made a great mistake. But what Poppy did is she squared off her shoulders and she let everybody sniff her. And I'm confident that she sent some of these calming signals, but I didn't know how to read them at the time. And the next thing she did is she just walked forward and everybody fell in line behind her. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit are ways in which a Scrum Master or a coach or a leader might send different signals, and how team members might send different signals to each other that could calm the situation. Before we dive into that, though, let's talk about when you want to engage. So this was one of the questions asked, I believe, by Prashant. So this is a way of starting to determine whether you need to engage or whether you need to ask for help. So one of the things you want to distinguish here is whether you have an intractable conflict, intractable meaning difficult to resolve, versus a healthy debate. And this is a bit of a judgment call, but you may see things that give you clues. So if you have people in the conflict using language about core values or moral beliefs, that may indicate that their position is non-negotiable. I heard some of this recently in a conflict where someone said, well, that behavior is just not professional and I won't do it and I won't accept it. So it's difficult to move someone from that kind of position, which doesn't mean that the conflict isn't a big deal, but it means that you in your current role may need to escalate to leadership, or you may need to ask for help from someone who's an experienced mediator. If the conflict has been going on for a long time, that's also a clue that you may not want to work it at the team or team of teams level. If there's a power struggle going on around a promotion or control over a particular silo of teams or something like that, you may also want to ask for help. And if there's harsh personal judgment expressed, you've kind of crossed the line from a work-based conflict to something that's very personality and personally based, and it may be turning mean. So you may want to escalate or ask for help from HR or another coach. So as we start to move to the right here, it starts to become more of a judgment call. If people often get emotionally triggered in conflict, if it's not getting toxic, that could be okay. So this is where you start to ask yourself, well, what else is going on? And if you have a conflict that's based on vague or poorly defined work, that is starting to turn into the sweet spot for a Scrum Master or a coach, because you can start conversations that can improve how that work is defined instead of people speculating. And then over here on the right, if we're talking about a specific work outcome, a specific process or approach, and it's a short-term conflict, what you're probably in is the area of healthy debate. So I'll give a couple minutes here for questions. Anybody have any questions? Is anything showing up in chat that we want to address?
So just quick clarification. Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between an outcome and a position?
Yeah. So an outcome would be, I'm thinking of a business outcome or a work-related outcome. So it may be, this is related to the idea that the work may not be defined as well as it could be, or that there's that it's been solutioned already and that someone has a different idea about a solution. A position would look more like, I am on the side of IT and IT is going to win. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. Good question.
I have a question, Erika.
Yes.
What I oftentimes see, and I love the presentation. I loved how you.
Is this Dan Feldman?
This is Dan Feldman.
Hello, Dan. Nice to see you.
Hello, Eric. Nice to see you, Erika. One of the things that I sort of see when it's in a nascent stage, an early stage, is that the language of fundamental values and moral beliefs is, even if somebody hasn't drawn a line in the sand, it appears either directly or indirectly between the lines of their speech. Even when you're talking about an overly vague, poorly defined work process or something of this nature, it's present. It's ever present, I guess I could say. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, I can speak to it by saying that, yes, I know what you're talking about. People who tend to have black and white thinking, it tends to show up in their language all the time. At least that's what I think I'm hearing you say. Is that right?
I would, yeah, that's one way of saying it, yes.
Okay. So do not take this as a rubric, right? I illustrated this as a teeter-totter with big circles for a reason, because it's not a decision tree and it's not a rubric. You're going to need to use your judgment, and your judgment is going to be based on prior experience and perhaps, again, asking for help. Get the advice of a coach or mediator or HR person. They're often trained in mediation, who may be able to help you sort out where you stand. The other thing is that as you go, people will reveal themselves. And so if you can create a neutral space that allows people to talk, sometimes this stuff shows up, gets talked about, and resolves itself. I don't know if that helps, but you're kind of leading me to the next thing I want to talk about. And this is where I say, hey, I'm going to point you at some terms, and I'm not going to teach you anything about them today. But I wanted to make sure that you were exposed to these 4 techniques for mediation. These are not the only techniques for mediation, but this is a general way to think about flowing through working with a team that's in conflict. And so take a screenshot, take these terms down, Google each of these things, because what you will find is a depth of material that you could then read about, steep in, perhaps take some of the techniques and practice them with your colleagues. This is a wonderful thing for Scrum Masters to do in the context of a community of practice. Aha, and more people are moving things. It's okay. That is my fail. And so I'm going to tuck these back here and lock them again. Oops. Okay. So coming back to here, the first step is that you need to get yourself in the right state of mind. So taking a neutral stance is not passive. This is a very active stance where you are making sure to build trust with the people involved. You're aiming through your neutrality to gain awareness of the whole situation. You're valuing people equally. You're supporting everyone to move forward. And you are participating. You're actively participating while remaining detached. Once you have that established, you can encourage people to use I statements. And there are right ways and wrong ways to use I statements. I think you're being a jerk is not a good I statement. So there's a format to it. This is just one. I've seen multiple formats for I statements. This one just had a pretty picture, which is why I threw it up here. And you'll see this is from a therapy site. So this is something that you may have learned in a previous life, in couples therapy or family therapy. The thing to remember here is that the I feel is about an emotion. So I feel sadness, or I feel anxiety, or I feel even something like left out, even though that starts to edge away from emotion. And then you have to talk about the context in which it's happening. So when you do this, I feel. And then the final part of the statement is what I need is a particular outcome. And so it's not particularly effective to focus on, I need you to change your behavior, because that ends up feeling very different than saying, I need us to get to a certain place together, help me get there. So if that appeals to you, I encourage you to look up the format of I statements and practice them with your friends. Once the point of using I statements is to get everybody's needs out there, everybody's perceptions, everybody's sense of the context in which the conflict is happening. And this is part of helping everybody gain awareness of the whole situation. And then, as a mediator, you might come in and help people reframe the conflict in a new way. This doesn't mean redefining it. This means helping them see the whole picture. So you take some time to articulate the whole picture, including everybody's perspectives, and helping them see how things are interconnected and related or not related. The important part about reframing is that you need to tell them that you're going to do that. And even better, you should ask their permission about whether or not you can do it. So this is not about manipulating people. This is just about taking the power of that neutral stance and then applying it with that perspective to help people see things in a different way. And then you can start moving away from focusing on problems and the past to focusing on solutions that are mutually beneficial and helping people come up with those solutions collaboratively. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on these. Again, I just wanted to hand you the information so that you could research and play with it, but I'll take a couple questions here.
Erika, do you want people to throw something in the chat or just speak up?
I don't have a strong preference. I don't see anything in the chat right now.
Hey, Erika, I have a question.
Hi, Lisa.
This is Lisa. Hi. So, number one, take a neutral stance. So, I would just love to hear, maybe even from the group, what happens when you feel like you can't, you're so invested in the issue that the team is having. And this is usually probably a Scrum Master role I would be playing. And it's hard to be neutral. So what advice would you have in that situation?
So I have very clear advice in that situation. Do not try to mediate because you can't mediate from a stance where you are invested in a particular outcome. So if there is a need for conflict mediation, I would bring in a neutral third party.
Yeah.
And just own that you're biased. That's okay. You're human. But don't pretend because you'll pay the price for pretending in terms of part of the team or at least one individual not trusting you.
Mhm.
They're not going to trust that you're their support, and that can have the impact of making the conflict worse in the long run. Great question.
And Dan asked another question in the chat. How does this relate to Mickey Cashton's convergent facilitation process based on nonviolent communication?
I can't answer that question because I'm not familiar with that process. So Dan, maybe you could find a link and share that in the chat so that people could research that.
I think there's a lot of parallels between nonviolent communication and the I statement. Nonviolent communication frame is typically objective. This thing happened. It made me feel X. I would like for you to help me by Y.
Yeah, that makes sense. These are concepts and practices that show up in a lot of different contexts. I am secretly trying to put a sticky note back, and I have found its home. I win. Okay. So what other questions do you have? Okay, I'll go back to sharing. We are almost to the exercise. So what we're going to do pretty much with the rest of this session is play around with an exercise that you can bring to your teams so that maybe you don't have to do this mediation process at all. Let me summon everybody here. So again, dogs, because dogs are awesome. But here, the point here is that if you can get everybody on your team to get a little more self-awareness about how their behavior impacts conflict, you can get a whole group of people self-adjusting. And you give them a common language to talk with each other about conflict, which can lead to working agreements at the team level. We're going to do this, but we're not going to do that. If somebody's checking out in some way, we have a working agreement that we will gently pull them back in and have a conversation, whatever those might look like. And so hopefully the light bulbs turn on in people's heads. They start to self-manage around conflict, and you can get everybody moving together in the same direction, like these two beautiful fluffy white dogs. So let's talk about what this looks like. First off, I want to give credit where credit is due. The conflict dynamics model that this is adapted from was developed by these three people, Linda Krause, Mark Davis, and Sal Capobianco. And they are all organizational psychologists. And if you follow this link here, which is in the PDF that you will have after this, you can read more deeply about how consultants and organizational psychologists use a much more complicated version of this model and their assessments built in, but they use it at the enterprise level sometimes to help organizations reduce conflict across the board. You are getting the cheap and easy version of it that you can use for your teams. And so one of the things I want to make sure you know is that if you have a Mural account and you pull it up right now, you can copy and paste anything from this Mural canvas and you will have it. I would recommend copying and pasting small pieces. And if there's something that's locked that you can't copy and paste, we can handle that at the end. I want you to be able to take this tool away. Again, I'm also providing a PDF of this mural, and it wasn't very time consuming to build. So this is an exercise that you could do remotely or with cards. I have done this with index cards. I've done it with pieces of paper. I've done it with sticky notes. I did it at the Scrum Gathering conference where we took two pieces of blue tape and drew the quadrants in the middle of a table, and then we throwed handmade cards down. So you can use this in any number of ways. and it's, again, easy to put together. And you can use it at a kickoff. You could use it at the beginning of a new coaching engagement to get people talking about conflict, depending on why you're there. You can use it as Catherine and Sherry mentioned, as a retrospective or for a lunch and learn. And you could use it for a quarterly team reset. And I strongly recommend that once you've done this, that you follow it with a working agreement session. Most teams struggle a little bit with behavioral working agreements unless they've been doing Agile for a while, but this can be a way to trigger that. So what you're going to do once you get into your breakout rooms is that you will each have a board. And so let me zoom out. The boards are all down here and they have numbers on them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when you come, if everybody would take a moment right now and go up to the top of the mural screen, you'll see an icon for the outline, and it just toggles on and off. And when you get into your room, you will find the board number that matches your room number. So let's say I'm in room number 10. I'll go down, I'll click on board number 10. It will zoom in for me and take me to where I want to go. And then what you're going to do as a group is you are going to take these sticky notes and put them somewhere on these quadrants. And the way you decide which quadrant to put it in is you look at these words here. So on the left side, these left 2 boxes are constructive behaviors. The right 2 boxes are destructive behaviors. And then those are sorted between passive and active behaviors. So the top 2 are passive, the bottom 2 are active. So for example, demeaning others, which is a pretty obviously destructive behavior, is also pretty obviously active because words need to leave your mouth. So there's your freebie. You would put that in that quadrant. And the point of this exercise is not for you to get it right. It's for you to have a conversation about what you think these behaviors are and whether you think they are constructive, destructive, passive, active, or something else. If you want to make up a category, I'm also down with that. So we're going to give you, I think, let's start with 6 minutes in your rooms to sort out, let's make it 7 minutes, I take it back, in your rooms to sort out where you think your sticky notes need to go. And when you're done, you can start bouncing around and looking at other groups' boards to see how they sorted it. Because I'm pretty sure that you're not going to sort it in the same way. At least that's how it tends to go. After you're done sorting, yes, there will be an answer key. And yes, you'll know what the right answers are according to the conflict dynamics model. We'll also talk about what these categories mean and what they tell you about the conflict that's happening on your team. What questions do you have before we go into breakout rooms?
What kind of group size would you like?
Let's see, how many people do we have total? 44. Oh, we have so many boards, so many extra boards. Let's do groups of 4.
And Erika, when they have discussed it, the 7 minutes, and then the other little part that you just mentioned, looking at other people's boards, how much time would you like them to spend looking and discussing other people's boards?
Not much time. So I'm assuming 6 minutes of the 7 are going to be taken up with your group. And if you don't finish, that's okay, right? What's important is the conversation, not perfectly executing on the task. So if you don't have time to look at the boards right away, just let me know when we come back into the room, and we will start to peak ourselves as a group.
Okay.
The other thing I recommend,
stay in the main room.
So yeah, I'll stay in the main room. And the other thing I recommend is picking someone to be your facilitator once you get in there. And don't take more than 20 seconds to decide that. No arm wrestling. just make a choice and go.
And Catherine, which group do we want to stay in the main room?
Just an indication, I think it's going to manually split everyone out. I might have to cherry pick people to pull back in. Because I think it's not going to count the main room as one. So
Right.
do you want to make the groups, do you want to do 12 groups so that I can pull some folks in? I'm sorry, that would be 10, one less.
Yeah,
Okay.
why don't you go ahead and create the breakout rooms that you're used to doing?
And Dan Feldman, no, there will be no favoritism. Okay. Nice
All
try.
right.
I give you credit for the try. Purely random.
Okay.
All
Are you
right.
ready? Okay, we're going to open all rooms.
So Catherine, should I join this room? No?
No, yeah, stay behind.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to have to cherry pick some people to pull back.
Okay.
Now that I'm looking at this, I could have moved some folks, but I'm going to just move some folks around.
So hi,
Maybe.
Jerry. Are you staying here with us now? Oh.
So I think everyone has to accept. I brought Shruti back, and I might choose a.
Howdy.
Hi.
You mind staying in the main room?
Sure.
Awesome.
Why not? Let's do this.
So
And
Jerry, you are muted. Are you going to participate in this group, or are you still having connection issues?
so
I think
I
he's having connection issues. Okay. Well, we can go ahead and just do this with a few people as a demonstration. Are you comfortable with that, Catherine, or should I get some more people?
yeah, I'm pulling a couple more in.
Okay.
So if I pulled you in, thanks for joining us. Sorry for the lack of warning.
Room 5 was really small, so I'm having them join here.
Oh, okay, great. All right, this is the ever-moving musical chairs of breakout rooms. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to make us group 20, just for the purposes of not getting in anyone else's way. Does that work? So go ahead and let's try meeting at board 20. So is everybody there?
Yep.
Board 20.
Way down at the bottom.
There you go.
All right, Sherry, and you and I are going to pop in and out of other groups, right?
Yeah.
Will do. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
Catherine, but
thanks,
can you make me a co-host because I am unable to right now?
I did so.
This is the best part of the video right here. This is where people are going to bookmark it and come back. Okay,
Kristen's going to snap it up.
All right, so Steve, Shruti, I know you're officially here. Andrew, are you here?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Sheila, you're on mute.
I can't find the link to go to the room.
Okay, that's all right. I'll share my screen and we'll do it that way. And Gary, are you with us? Okay.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yes, he's on mute.
Okay, that's all right. We can do without him. Okay, so you can either look at board 20 or you can look at my screen. So let's back off just a little bit. Let's start with displaying anger. Constructive, destructive, active, or passive?
Destructive.
Destructive.
Active.
Destructive, active.
Okay. Anyone want to fight about that? Okay. So how about expressing emotions?
Constructive.
Constructive, active.
Active.
Okay. What about delaying responding?
It's passive.
Yeah, seems
Destructive.
Destructive?
Yes.
Okay. Hiding emotions?
Passive destructive.
Passive destructive.
Okay. Avoiding conversation.
Passive
Passive.
destructive.
Destructive, yeah.
Okay. What about perspective taking?
Destructive.
Passive.
Constructive.
Passive.
Wait, I'm sorry, constructive or destructive?
I'm sorry. I voted constructive passive.
Constructive. Yeah.
Okay, everyone good with that?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay, how about demeaning others? I already gave you that one.
That's
Destructive.
active. Yeah.
Active.
And just plain mean. Okay, self-criticize. What about that?
That's destructive.
Passive.
Passive. Is that putting yourself down in front of the group? Well, I'm not a great programmer. I don't know about this. Is it a silent self-criticizing? What's your opinion on that?
What do you guys think?
I think it's silent. It's just a individual process.
So
Yeah, I would
would
agree
we,
with that.
would
I
we
would
agree that even if it's active, it's still indestructive? Is it in the right
yes.
column?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Would it be in the border? Can it be either active or passive depending on the situation?
Well, I'm okay with you guys deciding how you want to define this.
I mean, is there a rule or is this okay? I mean, it could be in either, it could be in both quadrants, right? If
I agree, it can be. I agree with you. I believe it can be in both quadrants, as long as we're allowed to put it in both quadrants.
yeah.
Yeah. You
Are we
get to make
breaking
up the
rules? Okay.
The rules are yours. Okay. How about winning at all costs?
Destructive,
Okay.
active,
Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting back channel text messages. Oh, okay. I'm going to ignore that. It's up to the hosts. So what about reaching out?
Constructive active.
Constructive active. I agree.
Okay. Creating solutions?
Constructive
constructive,
active.
active, yeah.
Yes.
Reflective thinking?
Constructive
passive.
Okay.
Looks like we can read each other's minds here.
So this is an interesting pairing. There's adapting versus yielding. So what do you think?
Well, with yielding, I would do a border on that one also. I think it's. I said when I said it out loud. Now I changed my mind.
Okay. So tell us why. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, my thought process is yielding sometimes can be constructive. There's sometimes you just do not want to. Unfortunately, we have a die on that hill kind of terminology at my company. So sometimes it is but it is destructive if you're constantly yielding to a bully or an aggressive output.
So what about adapting? Let's talk about these two together because they're a little pair.
I think adapting is probably more active, and it's constructive.
Agreed.
Active, constructive. Okay. And yielding, we're still not sure where it belongs. You want it on the border?
Border of, yeah, and passive as well.
And passive. Okay. So let me move this one over. Oh,
Right?
almost
Does everyone
done.
agree?
Anyone want to fight about it?
Yeah. I don't think yielding is, I think it's definitely destructive, not border.
Say more.
Well, if you're yielding, you're not really having a dialogue. You're not working with the team. You're not contributing, so it's to a better solution. You're not building a consensus by just yielding. Now, if you're having a dialogue and then being won over, that's different than yielding. That's when you talk about adapting. So to me, yielding is just giving in because you don't want to be bothered and not really taking it seriously. So, and I don't know whether I consider it passive or active, but I definitely consider it destructive.
What do you guys think?
I think those are very good points, but and I like that outlook. But I feel I looked at it more as yielding as something that it could be constructive when it really doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter to me. I don't have a real strong opinion about it either way. And you have a more of an opinion that the button should be blue. I just need it to be a button. I don't need it to be blue.
Okay.
I don't care. So I guess
So-
maybe that's my point of view.
Yes, thank you. I set you up a little bit because there are actually definitions of each of these. I don't like giving them to people right away because I like this conversation. It'll help you retain the material better. But we will look at definitions of what's meant by yielding when we look at the answer key. So is this an okay place to leave it right now, or do we even want to like edge it into active a bit?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I see this more as like choosing the battles that you want to fight.
Okay.
I will yield to it.
There you go.
Okay, so last but not least, retaliating. Where does that belong?
I see that
So
as
destructive.
negative. Yeah, destructive
Definitely.
and active.
Okay.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! So we have the boards. And if we look, oh, everybody's up here, I think. Oh, I hope people are actually working or this whole thing is not going well. Here we go. Okay. So here's another board. They had different ideas than you do. Here's board 6. Okay. Board 9. Good. We've got a whole bunch of divergence going on. So I am afraid that I may have co-hosts stranded in another room. So I want to kind of check in on the breakout rooms, if you will bear with me for a second. Nope, I don't have control of them. So, so what if I told you, we're going to go back. What if I told you that the sticky notes are actually nicely, cleanly distributed between these 4 quadrants? What do you think might be in the wrong place?
So are you saying that there should be 4 sticky notes per quadrant?
Yes, except one only has 3.
Okay.
I think we just had a notification from Sherry too. Did anybody catch what that said?
Uh-oh. No.
That's okay. It's all right.
Captain
I just
and
reached
are
out.
conspiring, and we never set a timer, so we were just kind of guessing. Probably 2 more minutes.
Okay, that sounds good.
Cool. Erika, do you need co-host permissions? I think Sherry can provide that.
I have them. I
Oh,
just
perfect.
don't have host permissions, which doesn't let me have all the power. So, okay.
Whoops.
So back to the question. What if I told you they were evenly distributed? What do you think is in? What do you think is off?
We could start with the self-criticizing, maybe a totally passive. It should be in the totally passive quadrant.
Okay, that's a possibility. What do you guys think?
I think that's appropriate. I think maybe delay responding should be in constructive.
So why? Tell me why. How does that work?
Well, as opposed to being somewhat impulsive, maybe you would table an item and think about it and come back later with more insight into that.
If you don't mind, Steve, maybe also adding to what Steve was saying about controlling your emotions by delaying a response instead of just coming back saying that's a completely horrible idea. Maybe you can take a step back and actually figure out or give a better reason why you have such a strong emotion.
Okay, so is everyone comfortable with the move?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that makes sense. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can reset a little bit before people flood in, which is what's going to happen next. But feel free to go to the mural if you are on it. I know a couple of you are not, and bounce around and look at other people's boards and see what you see. In the meantime, I'm going to set up for what's next. How is it going in the other rooms, Catherine?
Good, really good conversation. I see a lot of things on the lines. Good
Yeah.
discussion.
Excellent. And I'm just doing the grand reveal. You know, it's amazing how I can so carefully lock things down, and yet someone still manages to have some magic skills and move it. I've gotten to the point with my mural canvases being something that I have someone QA. I have a guy I work with named Trevor Peterson. Some of you might know him. He just will beat the crap out of your canvas and he will find all the things you don't have locked. And then there will still be one thing.
I think we have everybody back, Erika.
Okay, great. So did you have a chance to look at other people's boards?
Yeah, we did look around a bit, yes.
Okay. So what did you see?
Some things not the same as ours, but in a lot of cases, you know, the same.
Okay.
I saw a lot of line stragglers.
Yep, we were happy to see people put things on the line because we had a hard time placing it. It was like, well, it depends if it's like this or like
this. Context.
Yeah,
but
a lot of different opinions too. Sorry,
before the instruction went out to try and put 4 in each box, it seemed like there was somewhat of a consensus that there are not a lot of active or passive constructive things.
Which I thought was interesting. I saw that pattern too. So on the teams that had a really heavy weight towards the bottom, what was your conversation about that? I think that's interesting.
Can we take a step back where you said there's supposed to be 4 in each box?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I definitely did not hear that.
I didn't say it. So I did say it in the group that I was in towards the end. I said, what if I told you that there's supposed to be more evenly distributed with 4 in most of the boxes and 3 in one? And that just it drove a slightly deeper conversation. And they fixed something, so. So let me not torture you anymore. Let's look at what the answers are supposed to be. Now keep in mind, well, actually, before we do the answers, I want to go into these definitions. So this is probably part of why things were not, and I'm going to summon folks here, why there was some difference of opinion, because I did not give you the definitions, but the definitions do exist. And so when you run this with your teams, you can do it either way. Okay, no, let it go. Okay, I'm gonna lock this now. And that's my bad. When people are moving stuff, it's a facilitator fail, so don't feel bad that you did it. So you can either give them the definitions and then have them sort them, or you can run it the way I did. And I personally like doing it the way I did, because it creates more conversation. So it's up to you. But this is in the PDF, and it's also, this just pulled directly off that website link for the conflict dynamic model that I put in the PDF. Let's see. So I think that we had a good conversation, for instance, around adapting. What does that look like? And I believe in my group, we put it in as active. And so staying flexible, trying to make best of the situation. I think that even with that definition, there's it could be construed to be either passive or active, but it's clearly constructive, right? So let's look at the answer key now and reveal. Here it is, grand reveal. Boom. So this is how it's supposed to look. And actually, so this is based on the definitions we just looked at. So let's compare this to your board. And what do you see? What did you get wrong and why?
How is creating solutions passive?
Oh, you know what?
Same thing with expressing emotion. Yeah.
No, this is great. Isn't it fun to watch me make a mistake? There it is. You're right. I was just starting to dawn on that myself. So when you use this answer key, this will be fixed in the next mural I create. But when you look at this answer key, remember that I swapped these categories. Does this make more sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Much more, yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out. And it's on video for generations to come. So it just gives me a chance to do a failure bow. So what did you get in the wrong category? Or where do you disagree with this? Because that's also possible.
One that we did differently was hiding emotions. First of all, yes, we did say it was passive, but we thought it was on the fence. It depends. If you want to take your emotion out of the problem, then that's a constructive thing to do. But if you are hiding your emotions and doing yourself a disservice in doing so, then that's kind of a destructive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. What else do you see?
It was interesting because our team actually moved it into the active, and it was, I think the discussion on it was around you're actually doing something to hide it, right? It's not like you're just not expressing, right? You're consciously making a decision and doing a thing. So it's kind of active. But we didn't read the definitions either, so.
Yeah, because I set you up. Yeah.
Our team had issues, and I personally have issues with the definition for adapting and yielding. And the example that I came forward with adapting of, where it's not quite so easy is that there are many examples today throughout the world and in our own country, in our own cities, in our own organizations sometimes, or teams, which are toxic. And I think it's a profoundly sick thing to adapt to a toxic culture.
We had a similar response.
And then, yeah. And then just the other one before I step back is on yielding. I'm taking this from a perspective of a martial artist, an eternal martial artist, that yielding is sort of an active act of listening in which you're absorbing the energy, overextending the other person, and then redirecting that energy back in a very active way. So those were kind of two of the issues that were two of the terms that we were having issues with.
Right. And if I'd given you the definitions, you probably would have had an easier time of it. One of the other lessons about this that I run into all the time is that these are abstractions. When you just look at these words without defining terms, you can get different interpretations of them. And that's just normal human brains at work. So I leveraged that to get you talking to each other. But again, if you have a team that's not going to do well with that, you might want to provide them the definitions in advance. So this conversation about whether something's active or passive is also not as important as you might think it is, because this model, this is the conflict dynamic model. This is the grand reveal. And so let's look at it here, and then I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it more clearly. The idea here is that you have either constructive or destructive responses to an event, or hot buttons, which are a set of behaviors that are likely to trigger conflict. So again, if you look at that website, you can see what those are. And then the conflict starts. And then people have a choice. How am I going to respond? So the constructive responses fall into the category of things that are focused on tasks. And so you can see that these are about problem solving and positive affect. And the word affect here means the external expression of your emotional state. How are you coming across to somebody else? So if you are, for instance, expressing positive emotions, that will keep you on this side of the model. And what happens when you're doing that is that tension decreases, your group functioning improves, and the conflict de-escalates. On the other hand, if you have people engaging in destructive responses to the conflict, responses that are focused on personalities, that are heavy, laden with negative emotions, then tension will increase and group functioning will decrease, and your conflict will escalate. So notice what that means. It means that if you are avoiding the conflict, if you are yielding, if you are engaging in silent self-criticism, according to these organizational psychologists, and this is a research-based model, your conflict is going to escalate even though you're stepping out of it. Because you're not engaging constructively. And this is the area that most people have a big epiphany because many of us from our families of origin, etc., have been taught not to engage in conflict, to go do something else, or to hide our emotions, or to lower our eyes, or whatever it is. And a lot of people don't realize that they're in that destructive side of the conflict. So this can be a place where you get a big behavioral change on a team. And as a Scrum Master or coach or product owner, you can help support this. If someone has that epiphany and realizes that they tend to avoid and yield, you can say, well, how can I support you in moving over to these passive but more constructive things?
Erika?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a small question here.
Yeah.
So when we are saying not engaging with a conflict or a conflicting situation will yield to make that situation or that conflict worsen, right? So not engaging is equals to not trying to navigate through it, right? And it is not equal to working on conflict.
Yeah, I like the question. So I hear somebody's kid. Is that whose kid?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, that's your kid. Okay, that's fine. So what I'm hearing you ask is not engaging the same as not working on the conflict? Is that a good summary of your question?
Yes.
Yes. In the context of a self-organizing, highly collaborative team that is supposed to be working together to solve problems, I would say definitively yes. Now, that doesn't mean you want to push people into engaging with conflict when they're not comfortable. And it's very important to take your individual people and level of comfort into consideration. So remember, this is a model for teaching your team a new way of thinking that can help them talk to each other, doesn't mean it's going to solve all the things. And if you have someone who's shy or very conflict averse, you have to respect that. What you can do is slowly coach them over time into maybe more constructive, but still passive responses. And maybe someday they'll make the leap to a more active response, but they may need a lot of support. So we don't want to turn this into a blame game. We want to just use this as a way of talking about maybe what's next, if the team's comfortable, how can we encourage each other, et cetera, et cetera. Does that take care of your question, Vishal?
Yes, Erika, thank you.
Okay, great. Wonderful question.
I have a question, Erica. I think there was a book that I didn't read all the way that said we all had the duty of repair. And so it reminds me of that, of like, if someone's avoiding, they're not showing up with the responsibility of repairing.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you for sharing that. If you figure out what book that was, send me the title or share with this group. So I'm done with you, although as far as I'm concerned, we can sit and talk as long as Catherine and Sherry will let us do that. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great on time. And Sarah mentioned something in here also from Ronald Reagan. Sarah, do you want to talk about that? She writes, peace is not absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means, quoting Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, it's just something that's really spoken to me over the last year or so. And I have it written down and posted in my virtual office here at home. So just something that I always, because I'm not a conflict, I don't deal with conflict very well. My strengths on, I can't remember what the Myers-Briggs, or well, not Myers-Briggs, but
Strengths Finder.
Strengths Finder. Yeah. Harmony is like my number one. So obviously conflict is of the opposite. So, and I'm a Scrum Master. So I'm always looking for ways to deal with conflict and to not stress myself out and my team members. So
you might really, if you'll just permit me to kind of point you back at something, you might really benefit from going deep into the how to establish a neutral stance work.
Okay.
Because that'll help you stay calm, and it'll help you keep that wider view of the whole perspective of the problem. And that might feel better to someone who's focused on harmony.
Thank you.
It's a guess. Let me know how it goes. Okay.
So Kim mentioned that repairing is a Gottman Institute term.
Love Gottman.
And
yeah.
And so she was just wondering if it was one of the Gottman's books that came from. Kim, do you want to speak to that at all?
Oh, no, I put the link. I think that was referencing the book I mentioned earlier.
Okay. And then Nawaz Butt has a question as well. Nawaz, do you want to ask your question?
Hi there. Yep, I just wondering, any suggestions on managing conflicts in multicultural teams? Given that some of the cultures, people tend to not speak out or maybe not super expressive. So how do you go about working with those teams?
That is a really wonderful question, and I'm glad you asked it. So my experience with multicultural teams is limited to Czechs. And if you've ever hung out with people from Slavic countries, they tend to be very direct and not afraid of conflict in the slightest. That's why I got along with them really well. So the only other thing I can add to this, and then I just want to open it up to the room because I think there's a lot more expertise here than I can provide, is that I did have a wonderful conversation with a coach friend who was working with teams in India. And she said that what she had to learn was that she needed to actively encourage them to push back, and that she had to reinforce that a lot because it was just fundamentally part of how she needed to work and how the project was going to succeed. But she had to give them a lot of support and time to get used to the idea, because it was something culturally that they believed was really fundamentally rude. So they had to rewire their natural responses. And that struck me at the time as a very big request. I'm not sure it's fair to ask that of a team, but I think you can trust that they may be willing to have a conversation about what their cultural norms are. What I don't know is if this conflict dynamic model touched on multicultural considerations. It may have been just done in Western cultures, which certainly makes it biased. So that said, who here has experience working with multicultural teams and resolving conflict on those teams? I see Katie's hand up, Sherry's hand. Katie, do you want to add anything to this?
I think for me, it was just about establishing trust and patience, and just, over time saying, it's okay, and encouraging that. I don't think that they're ever going to be, I don't think people that are from a culture like that may adjust to being, totally okay with conflict, but I think, there's a little bit of a compromise that could be found there.
A lot of really good resources being put in the chat for other places you can research or read up on.
So let me share something that happened. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Let me share something that happened today, and it's not multicultural so much as just kind of personality traits. We had a refinement session, and at the end of the refinement, I mean, the net outcome of refinement is we only got like 2 stories done, and in an hour. And at the end, one of my more quiet guys says, "Well, that was a real shit show." And then he goes on, and I was like, "Well, I know we didn't get a lot accomplished, but what is he referring to?" And what it came down to is he's a very passive guy, and there was somebody else that was just dominating conversation, and you just couldn't get a word in edgewise. And so it's not so much, an international thing, but it is a cultural thing that one person, and what he was saying was helpful, but he didn't take a breath to give other people an opportunity to voice their thoughts. And so I have to learn to balance that and to, talk to the guy and say, kind of make your points and then take a step back and let other people step in, So,
Yeah, Dave, thank you for sharing that. I'm typing the title of a book into chat. It's going to take me a minute because it's a long title, but what you're talking about can be dealt with facilitation techniques that I think would be cross-cultural. So I'm putting a book called The Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision-Making in there. If you have not read this book, people, you need to read this book. I carried it around with me like a Bible for a year because it's filled with concrete techniques for dealing with this kind of dynamic or that kind of dynamic. It's just rich with material. So that might help. And I can't type and talk at the same time. So does anybody have anything else to add to our shared meeting?
Well, I wanted to ask Erika how comfortable you feel sharing. When you first presented this, which I wasn't at the physical presentation of it, when you first shared this, because everybody, this is a remount that I was hoping Erika was happy to come back and redo this in a virtual setting, but it was a silent activity.
Oh, great.
Discussing things.
Yeah.
And so what that dynamic looked like, and then we're now in a virtual setting, so it kind of handicapped us a little bit. So by adding in the conversation, created a different dynamic because we're in a virtual set. I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but when we first did this in a physical setting where everybody was physically present around a table, it was a silent activity. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So you watched my surprise at you reminding me that it was silent. That's because I'm constantly experimenting with these things. What I remember from it being silent is that it turns into a kind of physical tug of war and people like moving each other's cards, which I think is fun. And, you know, my exercise participants are my human guinea pigs, so thank you for doing that. But I think it creates a different cognitive state. So what I'm doing when I'm experimenting is looking for something that's fun, and people tend to think that's fun. It also creates more internal conversation rather than it being about an external debate. It forces people to think a little bit before they move the card. And some people, like me, think and talk at the same time, which means that we tend to be that dominant person in a conversation, whether or not we really want to be. So did you like it when we did it that way? Did you like it better?
I thought it was really, really intriguing. It definitely switched things up when I shared it with one particular team, which were chatterboxes. They were very uncomfortable with it. It was really hard for them.
Okay, so maybe you don't want to do it with that team. You don't want to make people too uncomfortable. But the reason I didn't do silent this time, I don't think you can do silent in a virtual context. Because everybody, even if they saw each other's mice, which I hid, they might both be trying to move a card at the same time and they might not be aware of it. Mural is not great at creating transparency about who's moving what. So there's I do a team health check in Mural, and we run into trouble all the time with two people moving the same dot. So
Cool.
Don't do it virtually. That's
Well, I think it's about time to be wrapping up here. It looks like Catherine has shared out the folder of the resources. I will say that you may want to look for an email later on, so please put your contact information in the Google spreadsheet, the sign-up sheet, simply because we may have to reshare that out after Erika makes a few tweaks on the answer key. So just be aware that there's like one little tweak that needs to be made, and it will likely be reshared out. So the best way to get it is if your contact information is in the sign-up sheet. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quick so you guys can see. This is what the PDF that you're going to receive, and my system's being slow. Do you guys see my screen here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what your PDF is going to look like. And so Erika's going to make a quick little switcheroo there, but that's what you're going to receive. We asked you to stay to the end just so we could, have this valuable conversation. But if everybody could just look on here and see if your name is here, and if it isn't, please tell me, and I'm going to add it. Our giveaway tonight is Erika. We're giving away Erika. A 30-minute coaching session with her. And so that's, if your name's not here, please let me know. Please add Sarah Wilbanks. Okay, anybody else?
Yep, it's Grant. I don't see myself on there.
You don't see yourself here? I thought okay.
Did you? Maybe
he just wants to be on there twice.
There it is.
There he is.
Yeah,
he's
just trying to.
Down in my
you
head,
in there,
and I see
Grant?
it. Yep, got it.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? All
I
right,
love
I'm gonna
this
go ahead
app.
and-
This is so much fun. I've never seen this before.
Oh, yes,
I'm on the list, yeah.
pickerwheel.com.
Wait, was there someone
Anybody
else
else?
on the list?
Oh, I'm
Nope,
on the
I
input.
think
Never
that's
mind.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and spin.
Oh, it's making me woozy.
Who knew we'd be playing virtual spin the bottle tonight?
Oh, please don't be fritzing out on me.
Wait, is Nancy here? Hi, Nancy.
Nancy finally, it looks like it's Stephen Connolly. Does that look right, guys?
Is Stephen in the
Yes.
room?
He is.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
So we'll share out a little link to you, Stephen, so make sure your information is in that sign-up sheet.
Okay, I will do that.
So it's a link to my calendar, and you can find a time that works for you and me too.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Can I ask one quick question? I've been putting it in chat. But
Absolutely.
No, sorry. So Erika, you had mentioned something about the taking that neutral stance. Was it a book that we need to be looking at, or was it a course, or what was your suggestion on how to, help us become that neutral person?
So I'm going to point you at the Google to start, because there's so much content on this that you should probably just start filtering through it. Just type in the phrase neutral stance. And if you want it to be specific about conflict, type in neutral stance mediation.
Okay.
And what I found on a very short Google search is about, tips and tricks for getting yourself there. What conversation might you have with yourself beforehand? Would you meditate? What kind of goals would you set for yourself? But I think you're going to find more than you want in about 10 seconds with the right search terms.
Thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. Sorry we missed your question in chat. Thank you to everybody. Really appreciate you being here. You were great fun. Peace
Thank you
out.
so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.